So I am not like a third of the way through Prince Caspian, not quite a half. Caspian is in the woods and he's met all these like magical creatures of Narnia of old, because at this point it has been who knows how long, hundreds of years, since the reign of Peter, Edmund, Susan, and Lucy. So, like, humans have kind of taken over since that time, and all the talking animals and the talking trees and stuff like that have kind of gone underground and are no longer welcome. Anyways, Caspian has escaped from his uncle's place because his uncle doesn't want him to live because the queen just had a son. So now the uncle has like a true heir to the throne. If not, Caspian would be the heir. And Caspian is the rightful king, or will be the rightful king. But now that his uncle, who is ruling right now, has a son, now Caspian's life is in danger. Caspian's tutor has sent him off into the woods, into the wild, to go find the old Narnians. Anyways, I just wanted to read this one quote. So Caspian's tutor is like a half-breed, like a dwarf human. So the dwarves don't like him. Well, some of the dwarves don't like him because he's a half-breed. And it just says, "Pa," said Nickabrick, a renegade dwarf, "a half and halfer. Shall I pass my sword through his throat?" "Be quiet, Nickabrick," said Trumpkin. "The creature can't help its ancestry." I thought that was just like an interesting line, that you can't help your ancestry. I know like people are mean and bullying never makes any sense, but it's always interesting. Like, you can't help if you were born rich or poor, if you're born into nobility or not. If you're born in England or Canada or Africa or somewhere in Asia, you don't control where you're born, and you don't control who your parents are or your grandparents, or on and on and on to the dawn of time. You don't control what mixed races might be in your background. You control who you marry. If I married somebody of a different race than me, I made that choice, but my kids didn't make that choice to grow up as a mixed race, right? So it's interesting that people bully others for something that they can't control at all, just like your looks. Like a big nose or ears that stick out or something. Like, you have no control over those physical features of your face or your body if you're short or tall or whatever. Yeah, it's just an interesting observation, I guess. And he's like, you can't control your ancestry, so why are we disliking people for things like their ancestry? Anyways, that's my thoughts so far. Not much else is going on. It's been a really bad week and really cold on top of that. So just trying to sit at home and read and edit and get all the things done.
On the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a partridge in a pear tree. On the second day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 2 turtle doves and a partridge in a pear tree. On the third day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 3 French hens, 2 turtle doves and a partridge in a
Rylan! Bring him back to me, Rylan! Jasper! Are you bowling?
Ryan, come get his bowling thing. Come grab his bowling thing.
Christmas, my true love gave to me 4 calling birds, 3 French hens, 2 turtle doves, and a partridge in a pear tree. On the 5th day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 5 golden rings, 4 calling birds, 3 French hens, 2 turtle doves, and a partridge in a pear tree. On the 6th day of Christmas, my true
Jasper! What's up?
Is that sure?
Jasper!
Don't you love beer?
Jasper, you're okay?
Okay.
He's hurt. Okay, Santa, there you go. Oh, that's
Jasper! So I finished Prince Caspian the other day. I always liked this book better than the movie, but I've only read it once. From what I remember, I thought that there was a lot more interactions with Aslan between, especially with him and Lucy in this, and there was more conversation around following Aslan, or Jesus, as the case may be. But there was only like one short scene of that in here, and it was still good, and the message was still good, but I just thought there was more of it. I still enjoyed this book. In the movie, they focused mainly on the battle. And in this, it's more getting to the battle. There are little battles that are happening that you don't see any of the action in. They are just talking about, like, this happened, this person was hurt. There was more people injured on this side or that side kind of thing, but you don't see any of the action until the very end. The book is all, like, leading up to that and the journey to get to that kind of, like, final battle. In the movie, it's mostly focused on the actual battle. I think if they just translated this straight into a movie, kind of the way they did with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is pretty, I'd say, faithful to the book. If they did that with this one, I think it would be boring. It doesn't translate well necessarily into a film just because it is just a lot of travel and talking and discussing things. The movie, I don't remember it being the best. But there was the one scene in here that I kind of wanted to discuss. A cute little winter bookmark from Emily Cromwell Designs. So cute. So in this book, it has been 1 year since the children, Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy, have gone home from Narnia. It's been 1 year, and they get called back. They're on the train heading home from school, or heading to school. I think they're heading to school, maybe. Now, all four of them were sitting on a seat at a railway station with trunks and playboxes piled up around them. They were, in fact, on their way back to school. They had traveled together as far as this station, which was a junction. So they get called back into Narnia. And Prince Caspian has called them with Susan's horn, which was one of the gifts that she got from Santa in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe when they were first there. And when you blow the horn, help will come. So they've been called back into Narnia, and this dwarf goes to find them, because there's like 3 places that they believe that this like magical portal door could be open kind of thing. Prince Caspian and his team are all there. Prince Caspian comes from a line of people, the Telemarines or whatever, and he is rightfully next in line for the throne, but his uncle, they believe, killed his father and anyone else who would have been the next king, and then his uncle had a son. So Caspian's life was in danger, and he ran and met up with all these like old Narnians, like dwarves and centaurs and things like that. So they're calling for help, and they send one of the dwarves off to see if help has arrived. The dwarf meets Edmund and Peter and Susan and Lucy. So they have to follow this path back to where Caspian is, which is at like Aslan's How, I guess, which is where the stone table was broken when Aslan came back to life. So they're trying to find this path. And Lucy sees Aslan, and she's like, he's up there, he's telling us to go this way. And they're like, or down there, or whatever. And they're like, no, it would be better for us to go up top. It kind of reminds me of that scene in Finding Nemo, when Dory talks to those fish, that school of fish that are like changing, and the whole school of fish make signs and stuff like that. And then the fish tells her, make sure you go through the rocks or whatever. And it looks really scary and ominous. And Marlin is like, no, we're not going that way. We're going this way. And she's like, no, I feel like we're supposed to go through this. And he's like, no, that's dumb. And goes up, and then they get stuck in the jellyfish and stuff. That's kind of like this, where Lucy's like, I see Aslan. We're supposed to go this way. And the other kids are like, Aslan's not there. We don't see him. We don't know what you're talking about. And that way doesn't make any sense. And when you're a Christian and you're following God and you're doing what God calls you to do, that is pretty much your life. You're just like, this doesn't make sense, but God tells me to do it. And somehow, some way, it just works out. But they're not believing Lucy in this. So she's like, fine, I will stick with you guys because I'm the youngest, you guys are older, apparently you know what you're doing, kind of thing. Anyways, they are traveling all day trying to get through this area, and it's not working. So sometime in the night, Lucy wakes up and kind of just walks around. She hears some noises or something. She decides to go stretch her legs. She's having a hard time sleeping. And she meets with Aslan, and she sees him, like, in the woods. Cute little illustration. She runs to him and, like, embraces him. And I like this one line where he says, "Welcome, child." He said, "Aslan," said Lucy, "you're bigger." "That is because you are older, little one," answered he. "Not because you are? I am not. But every year you grow, you will find me bigger." So, Aslan, God, Jesus, is always the same size. He is God. He's not changing. He's not growing smaller or bigger. God becomes bigger to us every time that we put our faith in him and trust him for something. So Lucy's growing bigger and she's trusting him. She's still seeing him and experiencing him here in Narnia. So he is bigger to her because she's following him and allowing him to lead her. She's experiencing more of Aslan. So he just seems bigger. He feels bigger to her. And the bigger we get, the bigger our problems become. The more complicated our problems become, and the bigger God that we need. This past half of the year, yeah, it's been a rough one for us since August. Everything has gone wrong, and yeah, that's when you need a big God. But God never changes, and that's something we can put our hope in. Anyways, the next scene that they're talking, Aslan tells her, "We must not lie here for long. You have work in hand, and much time has been lost today." "Yes, isn't it a shame?" said Lucy. "I saw you all right. They wouldn't believe me." And then she's talking to him and says, "But it wasn't my fault anyway, was it?" And he's just looking at her, and she says, "Oh, Aslan," said Lucy, "you don't mean it was. How could I couldn't have left the others and come up to you alone. How could I? Don't you look at me like that. Oh, well, I suppose I could, yes, and I wouldn't have been alone, I know, not if I was with you. But what would have been the good?" Aslan said nothing. "You mean," said Lucy, rather faintly, "that it would have turned out all right, somehow? But how? Please, Aslan, am I not to know?" "To know what would have happened, child?" said Aslan. "No, nobody's ever told that." "Oh dear," said Lucy. This conversation that Lucy's having with Aslan, she's trying to come up with excuses about why she didn't follow him, because it was wiser for her to follow her older siblings. And when you think about it from our logical perspective, that does make sense, right? That she is the youngest, and they have more experience, and they supposedly know what they're doing, and this dwarf kind of knows the area and how to get back to where they need to go, right? So logically, that makes sense. But she saw Aslan, and Aslan was calling her, calling all of them really, but she's the only one who saw him. And he said, "No, follow me. Let's go this way." He knows a way that they don't understand. He can see what they can't see, right? And that's what she's saying, like, how could I have left the others? And that she wouldn't be alone, because Aslan would have been there, and she would have been perfectly safe. No matter where you are, if God has called you there, that's where you're meant to be, and you are... We talked about this in the first book where they say, is Aslan safe? Is he a safe line? They're like, he is not safe, but he is good. We have our perceptions of what safety is. We want to be in the will of God. If you believe in God and believe that he has the best for you, then that's where you want to be, right? Like, that only makes sense. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I know what I'm trying to say. I just don't know if I'm getting it out properly. Basically, this conversation here between Aslan and Lucy is about following God, no matter what other people are saying around you, or what they're telling you, or if they believe you, or if they see what you are seeing or not. God is calling you to do something. It is your responsibility to follow God. It is not your responsibility to convince other people about what God is saying. Like, God calls us all to evangelize and tell people about him, about Jesus, about salvation. But it is not our job to make you believe that. That's totally up to you. So I just liked this conversation here where it's like Aslan is telling Lucy, like, you are responsible for you. And he is telling Lucy, go wake up the others. We have to go. We've lost a lot of time today and we need to get moving. And she asks, will they see you? And he says, certainly not at first, said Aslan. Later on, it depends. But they won't believe me, said Lucy. It doesn't matter, said Aslan. And that's what made me think, our job is just to tell people of Jesus, or to follow Jesus, what we believe he's calling us to do. And whether other people believe us or not, or think we're crazy or not, doesn't matter. And I'm always telling that to my kids. Like, you can only control you. Like, if I'm talking to my son about something, he'll be like, well, what about my sisters? Why aren't they doing this thing? And I'm like, because that doesn't matter. What I'm talking to you about is you. Don't worry about what your sisters are doing or not doing, or what I have asked them to do or not do. That's between me and them. What you need to worry about is you. And it's the same with our relationship with God. We need to worry about what God is calling us to do. And he may be asking us to talk to other people, to be a preacher or evangelize or share a message or whatever. And if they don't believe us, that's not on us. It's not our job to make people believe. It's our job just to do our job, our part in the story. And then Susan, already in this book, you're seeing that Susan is not an unbeliever, but she's more, what's the word I'm thinking of? Skeptical, a little bit more practical, and she doesn't see Aslan. She's like, Lucy, like, you're being silly, you're having a dream. And when she's trying to wake them up, and I do hope, said Lucy in a tremulous voice, that you will all come with me, because I'll have to go with him whether anyone else does or not. So Lucy is seeing here, like, I'm following Aslan. Whether you come with me or not, that is where I am going. And she's trying to convince the others, but Susan is just not. She's like, don't talk nonsense, Lucy, said Susan. Of course you can't go off on your own. Don't let her, Peter. She's being downright naughty. And Edmund points out, like, she's been right before. When none of them believed her when Lucy first found Narnia. And then Edmund found it, and then the others found it after. So Edmund's like, come on, you guys. Like, it's not like Lucy to make up this stuff, right? And then there's one more scene here that I wanted to mention. They decide to start following Lucy. They're like, fine. And only Lucy can see Aslan still at this point. So she's following Aslan. She's got her eyes fixed on him, and she's like, I'm ready to go, let's go. And they're all just trusting Lucy to know where she's going. So they're putting a lot of faith in Lucy. Susan was the worst. Supposing I started behaving like Lucy, she said, I might threaten to stay here while the rest of you went on or not. I jolly well think I shall. Because Peter's already said they're going, and he's the High King, and Trumpkin the dwarf is like, obey the High King, your majesty, and let's be off. So they're all following, and Susan's being like, about it. So at last they got on the move. Lucy went first, biting her lip and trying not to say all the things she thought of saying to Susan. But she forgot them when she fixed her eyes on Aslan. And I thought that was a really good line as well, because a lot of times we want to go off on somebody. Whether that's your partner, your children, your parents, a friend, a coworker, a customer, whatever. Like, there's a lot of times we just YouTube comments, right? Comment sections on anything. You just want to go off on somebody. And that's not always the right thing to do. Sometimes you're just doing it because you're angry and you're not actually helping the situation at all. And you could be making things worse, even like if you're talking to your kids or something like that. Like, you might need to have a serious conversation with somebody, but this time, this place, with that attitude is not the right time, and it's just going to make things worse, right? But I like this. She forgot them when she fixed her eyes on Aslan. So Lucy was focused on what was important and not focusing on all the things that she wanted to say to Susan and, like, snap back at her kind of thing. So I liked that. Like, focus your eyes on Jesus and everything else doesn't matter. It comes into a proper perspective. And focus your eyes on Aslan and everything else just falls into place, and you can just, okay, this is what I meant to be doing. And you're not getting into these, like, little bickering fights and things that just don't matter. And then this last line I wanted to talk about. Everyone has seen Aslan now at this point. He has made himself visible to everyone. And Susan is saying, and I really believed it was him tonight when you woke us up. I mean, deep down inside. Or I could have if I'd let myself. And I thought that was a really interesting one, because Susan is saying, if I let myself. And sometimes we just don't want to believe something. We have our beliefs, and we believe we're right. Of course, that's why we hold those beliefs. And sometimes those beliefs are challenged. Sometimes things are proven wrong or whatever. We get new information, but we just don't want to change our minds. And we don't want to believe in something. Like, there could be, like, irrefutable proof of God, and people still won't believe because they don't want to. I don't think we'll ever have, like, 100% proof in the sense of there has to be an element of faith out there for any faith, whether you're Muslim, Jewish, Christian, anything that's going to believe in a higher deity, in some kind of creator, something outside of space and time. There has to be that element of faith and belief there. If it was obvious, then most people would believe in it. Most of the world would there wouldn't be all these, like, different religions and stuff. Most people would believe in that one thing because it's like, it's there in your face. It's obvious. So there has to be that element of faith. I could have if I'd let myself. So it's like deep down inside, Susan feels this thing, but she's like, no, I don't want to. I don't want to believe it. It's difficult. It's hard. It messes with what else I'm trying to do in life. Whatever it is, whatever the reason is that you're saying no to it. So I just thought that was a really good line. And I really like how this is written for kids. And some of the stuff is kind of difficult. And there's a scene that comes up and a dwarf's head gets cut off. And it's pretty brutal. And there's like lots of stuff going on. I listened to the end of this book. And I meant to go back and look through at all the pictures. But yeah, I liked the book. I enjoyed the story there, those few little pages there where Lucy and Aslan are having a conversation, and then Susan and Peter and Edmund and all of them, and they're talking about whether or not they believe in Aslan anymore and what's going on. And then they learn at the end that Peter and Susan, at the end of this book, find out that they will not be coming back to Narnia, that they are old enough now that they don't need to come back to Narnia for whatever reason. They have outgrown that stage in their life, I guess. Now I am jumping into the Voyage of the Dawn Trotter, so watch out for that vlog coming up next. Thank you for watching. Comment down below if you've read any of the Narnia books, what your favorite book is, if you enjoyed Prince Caspian, and leave me a horse emoji, a prince emoji, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye!